Coming up on today's Ben Shapiro Show, President Trump honors Charlie Kirk with a posthumous Medal of Presidential Freedom. Plus, we get to a supposed blockbuster Politico story about groyperism, white supremacy, ugly stuff inside young Republican chats. What does that mean? And what is the duty of conservatives to quote-unquote unify with such stuff? We'll get to all of it. First, October is packed with new releases on Daily Wire. Plus, tonight is a big one, the premiere of Friendly Fire. Join me, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, and Andrew Klavan, unscripted, unfiltered, no moderators, nothing off limits, live at 7 p.m. Eastern. Plus, special appearances from Isabel Brown and Jeremy Boring with your first look at the Pendragon cycle. That all kicks off tonight. Don't wait. Join now. Get 40% off a new annual membership with code FALL40 at dailywire.com. Well, folks, President Trump is back in the United States, and on his first day back in the United States, which was Tuesday, he did something incredibly moving. He posthumously awarded America's highest civilian honor to our friend Charlie Kirk, who, of course, was assassinated just a few weeks ago. Erica Kirk talked as well. Here was the President of the United States granting that extraordinary honor to Charlie.
He was assassinated in the prime of his life for boldly speaking the truth, for living his faith and relentlessly fighting for a better and stronger America. He loved this country. And that's why this afternoon it's my privilege to posthumously award Charles James Kirk, our nation's highest civilian honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Thank you.
Now, the president did say that he had raced halfway around the globe, of course, and he was going to call Erica Kirk and ask for a delay. And then he realized, actually, that Tuesday was Charlie's birthday, and he said he didn't have it in his heart to actually delay the event. Argentina's President Javier Milei stayed on to attend the ceremony as well. The President of the United States talked about how Charlie Kirk was what he called a martyr for truth. Here was the president.
As I said, on the day that he was assassinated, Charlie Kirk was a martyr for truth and for freedom. And from Socrates to think, and to St. Peter, from Abraham Lincoln to Martin Luther King, those who change history the most, and he really did, have always risked their lives for causes they were put on earth to defend.
And the president went on to say that he was going to continue the fight because Charlie, of course, was not just a Christian activist. He was not just a person who spoke publicly. He was, in fact, a mover and shaker inside the Republican Party. He was a major force behind the re-election of President Trump in 2024, and he was very tight with the Vice President of the United States. Obviously, TPUSA was gearing up as a major force behind the Vice President's potential campaign in 2028. Here's the President of the United States.
So we hold his memory in our hearts forever. Every single day of this administration, we will continue to carry out the mission for which he lived, and he really did. He lived for this country. He lived for his wife and his family, but he lived for this country too. In Charlie's honor, we will continue like we have been to fight, 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 and to win, win, win. We're going to win so much.
In a bit, we're going to talk about what strategy it takes to win, because one thing about Charlie that Charlie was very much in favor of was open and honest debate. It's something that he went out and he did in the most civil way. And the reason that Charlie was famous was not for the stuff that made him powerful inside the Republican Party, all the sort of get out the vote efforts and the coalition building behind the scenes. The reason that Charlie was incredibly popular is because of these debates that he did on campus, where he had these open conversations with people and tens of millions, billions, in fact, of views on places like TikTok. That is the reason why you had this extraordinary outpouring of grief and support for Erica Kirk and TPUSA over the course of the last month. It remains just a beyond words event that Charlie was taken away from the country. Again, it's been about a month. Tuesday would have been his 32nd birthday, which is just unthinkable, obviously. The State Department, meanwhile, has made the move to bar foreigners who enter the United States and have a record of wishing death upon Charlie Kirk or celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. The State Department put out a list of people who it would be barring from the United States. They tweeted out, quote, "The United States has no obligation to host foreigners who wish death on Americans. The State Department continues to identify visa holders who celebrated the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk. Here are just a few examples of aliens who are no longer welcome in the United States. An Argentine national who said that Kirk, quote, devoted his entire life spreading racist, xenophobic, misogynistic rhetoric and deserves to burn in hell, visa revoked. A South African national who mocked Americans grieving the loss of Kirk, saying they're hurt that the racist rally ended in attempted martyrdom and alleging he was used to astroturf a movement of white nationalist trailer trash, visa revoked. A Mexican national who said Kirk died being a racist, he died being a misogynist, and said there are people who deserve to die, there are people who would make the world better off dead, visa revoked. And that list continues. The State Department says the President and Secretary of State Marco Rubio will defend our borders, our culture, and our citizens by enforcing our immigration laws. Aliens who take advantage of America's hospitality while celebrating the assassination of our citizens will be removed. And of course, that makes perfect sense. It is worth noting, by the way, that MSNBC was the only major news network not to air that Medal of Freedom ceremony for Charlie Kirk, which is really quite astonishing, actually. Even CNN aired the ceremony. The fact that MSNBC refused to do so, it wasn't as though there was a lot on the TV at that point. I mean, the President of the United States had virtually the entire cabinet there as he honored Charlie Kirk, plus Erica Kirk was there as well. It is typical MSNBC to instead tune to some other topic. But this speaks to the broader problem of violence and extremism and radical rhetoric and radical action inside the United States, not just people who are imported from outside the United States who hate enormous parts of our culture, who hate the central basis of our civilization, but people who have been brought up in the United States to hate precisely that civilization. It remains a sort of shocking thing that so many members of the left are willing to look the other way. Obviously, the most obvious example recently is the Attorney General candidate in Virginia, Jay Jones, who was caught on a text thread to a Republican saying that he wished for the death of the Virginia Speaker of the House of Delegates, and then made some extraordinarily terrible comments about the speaker's children. He is still in the race in Virginia. There have been very few Democratic calls for him to drop out of the race. In just a moment, we'll get to the supposed big story of the day, a Politico story about young Republicans using white supremacist, Nazi-adjacent rhetoric and all the rest. First, we are being watched. Every time you use the internet, your internet service provider or ISP is recording everything you do online. They're watching what websites you go to and how much time you spend there. They can see everything you're doing, even if you're using a private browser. Don't want to fall victim to this? You don't have to. Just get ExpressVPN. With ExpressVPN, 100% of my online activity is rerouted through secure encrypted servers. This makes it impossible for my ISP to see what I'm doing online. ExpressVPN also hides my IP address, the number that identifies you on the internet. Data brokers use it to build a profile on you, and then they sell it to marketers and other companies. ExpressVPN is easy to use. It just takes one click. It works on all your devices, phones, tablets, smart TVs, desktops. You can have it on up to 14 devices all at once, so you can give the gift of privacy and freedom to your entire family. As I'm traveling a lot right now, it means my ExpressVPN is on all the time because I'm constantly using public Wi-Fi and all the rest. Right now, you can get an extra 4 months when you use my special link. Go to expressvpn.com/Ben. Get 4 extra months of ExpressVPN. That's expressvpn.com/Ben. expressvpn.com/Ben. Also, our society works because of the freedoms guaranteed by the First Amendment. Americans should be able to speak openly about honesty, family, traditional values without retribution. That's something Pure Talk proudly supports. They sponsor this show, and that allows me to stand strong behind the microphone every day and share the truth with you. Support the brands that defend freedom and pro-American values. I encourage you to switch your wireless service to Pure Talk. You're going to get great 5G coverage on an extremely reliable and secure network. Again, I use Pure Talk all the time. The coverage is great, got a great tower network, and I'm not spending as much money, and it's a company that actually kind of, likes us. For just $35 a month, you'll get a plan with a ton of data, and you'll also get a free 1-year membership to Daily Wire Plus. That's how much Pure Talk believes in what we do here at the Daily Wire. They also believe in creating American jobs and supporting small business. So if you're a small business owner, you can save even more while enjoying that white glove service. Go to puretalk.com/Shapiro. Switch to Pure Talk with a qualifying plan of $35. Get a free 1-year membership to Daily Wire Plus. That's puretalk.com/Shapiro for a wireless company that's not afraid to share your values. Meanwhile, Democrats continue to cover up the violence in the ideological structures of their own side. Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, who is widely touted as a possible VP candidate with Kamala Harris and is still touted as a possible presidential candidate in 2028. I don't think that's a real candidacy. I think it's chimerical. But Josh Shapiro called for accountability after the arsonist who set fire to the Pennsylvania governor's residence, which forced Josh Shapiro and his family to evacuate, received 25 to 50 years in prison. That particular arsonist was 38 years old and pled guilty, according to the Wall Street Journal, to state charges of attempted murder, aggravated arson, burglary, and other charges under a plea deal. He will not be eligible for parole until 2050. Law enforcement officials said that the arsonist was in part motivated by his views on the Israel-Gaza war. In other words, he was attacking Josh Shapiro because Josh Shapiro is a Jew, and Josh Shapiro also happens to be generally pro-Israel. This was a member of the radical anti-Israel left, in other words. And yet here is Josh Shapiro calling for accountability, especially in rhetorical terms, without actually calling out the ideological structure at issue.
I've talked to people who are thinking about running for office, who have said they don't want to because they don't want to put their families at risk. These are good people who just want to serve, who want to do right by their communities, who are being impacted by this unacceptable level of political violence that we're seeing in our country. I think we need real accountability for acts of political violence. And today is real accountability for the violence that came here to Pennsylvania.
But as I say, it's not just about calling out acts of political violence. That's not enough. Whether it's the arson attack on Josh Shapiro's home or whether it is the murder of Charlie Kirk, calling out these structures, the rhetorical and ideological permission structures that allow for violence to happen, that's the thing that needs to happen. And so when Josh Shapiro doesn't call out the fact that this person was a radical pro-Hamas activist who did this, that is a missed opportunity and, in fact, a moral shortcoming. The fact that Democrats are not calling out the ideological thought structure that led to Charlie's assassination, which we've talked about on the show, this thought structure that says that you're a member of a victimized group and that the superstructure of society is targeting you, and that therefore you have every ability, nay, every moral impetus to go and do violence to somebody else. The failure to call that out, particularly when it comes to trans violence, is a huge, huge problem, obviously. And the entire left has gone completely silent on all of that, when the left generally goes silent on Jay Jones and pretends that what he was saying about the Speaker of the House, that he was a fascist, this sort of language is a problem. It is a problem. It is a problem when a Democratic Party volunteer is found handing a bracelet to a child that literally says, "Is he dead yet?" referring to President Trump. According to Mediaite, that would have been Wisconsin's Winnebago County Democratic Party volunteer, who apparently handed that bracelet to an 8-year-old at a local farmer's market. According to Katie Neubauer and her family, they were attending the Oshkosh Farmer's Market last Saturday when this moment took place. Here was Katie Neubauer describing to Fox WLUK 11 in Green Bay and surrounding cities.
Katie Neubauer says she and her family were enjoying their Saturday morning at the Oshkosh Farmers Market this past weekend. But things took a turn, she says, when her 8-year-old child was handed a bracelet from a member of the Winnebago County Democratic Party's booth.
The guy behind the tent table said, "Hey, give this to your mom. She's going to really want this." And one of the children comes running up, gives us the bracelet, and we're looking at it, and it literally says, "Is he dead yet?" on the bracelet.
Neubauer and the Republican Party of Winnebago County assumed this was a hate speech reference to President Donald Trump. Fox 11 was unable to get a photo of the bracelets. We've been working to get questions answered by the County Democratic Party.
Okay, so, again, the fact that this has become so mainstream, and it is, I mean, to pretend that these sort of ideological takes are not mainstream would be to ignore the rising tide of violent rhetoric in the country. It is also worthwhile noting that it is incumbent on people of all sides to condemn this, particularly from their own side. It's very easy for people on the right to condemn this stuff because, of course, it's not happening on our side in quite the same way. But when ugly things happen on your own side, yes, you do have some sort of moral duty to take note of this and then to condemn it. Okay, so this brings me to a story from Politico. There's a story from Politico. It's making the rounds, creating an enormous amount of dyspepsia on the right particularly. Titled, "I Love Hitler, Leaked Messages Expose Young Republicans' Racist Chat." Okay, so as we'll see, it is questionable about whether that actual line, "I love Hitler," was sort of said in jest or whether it was said sort of authentically, right? All those pieces of the chat have been released by Politico. So here is the story. Quote, "Leaders of young Republican groups throughout the country worried what would happen if their Telegram chat ever got leaked, but they kept typing anyway. They referred to black people as monkeys and the watermelon people and mused about putting their political opponents in gas chambers. They talked about their enemies and driving them to suicide and lauded Republicans who they believed support slavery. William Hendricks, the Kansas Young Republicans vice chair, used the words N-word with an A at the end and N-word with a UH at the end, variations on the N-word itself, more than a dozen times in the chat. Bobby Walker, the vice chair of the New York State Young Republicans at the time, referred to as epic. Peter Giunta, who at the time was chair of the same organization, wrote in a message sent in June that everyone that votes no is going to the gas chamber. Giunta was referring to an upcoming vote on whether he should become chair of the Young Republican National Federation, the GOP's 15,000-member political organization for Republicans between 18 and 40 years old. Now, a lot of this is edgelordism. This has been existing on the right, particularly among young right-wingers, for a very long time. I remember going 2015, 2016, I was speaking at some college campus in California, and some kid came over and started using some Groyper memes, and he was doing it in jest. And I said to him, listen, I understand that you're just being an edgelord right now, but I'm just telling you, if you put that stuff online, if you put that stuff in chats, if you actually authentically think that stuff, first of all, you're wrong. But second of all, if you put that stuff online, there are social consequences to saying and believing truly terrible things. Again, I'm not talking here about whether we should ban people from Facebook. Obviously, the answer is no, or whether we should ban people from YouTube or X. I've argued in favor of the restoration of people's accounts on these platforms because they are platforms. They are not, in fact, publications. However, in your life, there are social consequences to people who say things that you believe are terrible. They don't get to come over to dinner at your house, for example. They don't get to marry your kids, or you don't date them. Right? We all have social lines that we draw all the time. And the question is where to draw those lines and how those lines ought to be drawn. Listen, there's no question that the shutting tight of the Overton window by the left means that the explosion of the Overton window has let in an enormous amount of garbage. That is just a reality. And it is the case that this sort of language is routinely used now among some segment, not all, not even a majority, but among some fragmented segment of the right-wing ecosystem among young people. I mean, that is a reality. More on unity. When should we unify? How should we, with whom should we unify? First, every tape you own is dying. It's not dramatic, it's just science. VHS tapes only last 10 to 20 years. That box in your attic, mold, heat, moisture, it's all eating away at your family history, weddings, first steps, birthdays, you name it. Legacy Box lets you stop that decay today. You send them your tapes, film reels, and photos. They digitize it all by hand in the United States, and they send back digital files you can keep forever. It's that easy. We've used Legacy Box at our house. We used it for my parents, for my in-laws. And we took old film reels, we sent them in, and suddenly all of that comes to life again. You can see yourself as a child with your parents when they were young, your childhood birthdays, all of that. It's like reclaiming a part of your own past. It's about more than nostalgia. It's about actually protecting something that once it's gone, is just gone. It's irreplaceable. Legacy Box has helped over 1 million families do exactly that. Right now, you can join them at 50% off. Go to legacybox.com/Shapiro to save. That's legacybox.com/Shapiro. Don't lose your legacy. Save it today with Legacy Box. legacybox.com/Shapiro. Get started today. Also, you know what's funny? When I started Daily Wire, I thought the hard part would be creating the content. Turns out, dealing with all the behind-the-scenes stuff, the hiring, HR policies, employee issues, that's the stuff that's wildly time-consuming. And I know I'm not alone. When you're a business owner, every second of your time is really valuable. So don't waste your energy and risk losing money dealing with time-sucking payroll issues, office politics, HR infractions. Focus on the stuff that matters most. Running your business with help from Bambee. Here's what makes Bambee different. They give you access to your very own dedicated HR manager at a fraction of what it costs to employ somebody full-time. And get this, Bambee costs just $29 a month, whether you have 10, 75, even 100 employees. If I had Bambee when I was first building this team, it would have saved me countless hours and headaches. Instead of getting bogged down with paperwork and compliance issues, I could have focused on growing my show and connecting with my audience. With Bambee's HR Autopilot, you'll never have to waste your valuable time getting into the weeds of HR policies, onboarding, or terminations. Plus, Bambee is month-to-month, no hidden fees. You can cancel anytime. Right now, get 1 month of Bambee for just $1. Go to Bambee.com, type in Ben Shapiro under podcast to schedule your first call with an HR manager right now. That's 1 month of Bambee for just $1 at BAMBEE.com. Ben Shapiro podcast. So here is what I hope will represent an honest rubric for dealing with issues like this. 1, obviously, it is very cynical for Politico to target young GOP group chats while leaving left-wing chats untouched. Because I promise you, these same left-wing chats exist. They're just as bad, if not worse. There are university chats among professors that are just as bad, if not worse. All of that is true. All of that is true. 2, the right doesn't have an obligation to go totally insane over such chats. Okay, what the left likes to do and what the media love to do is they love to take stuff like this and then they say, to every member of the Republican Party, you must personally condemn all of this. And the answer should be, I'm happy to condemn the crap in there, but why am I responsible for it? I'm not responsible for that. Well, why is the implication even that I'm responsible for that? I don't believe it. And your implication that everyone on the right is responsible for a group of young Republicans who say terrible things in private to one another, that somehow that implicates the entire Republican Party, while meanwhile the Attorney General candidate in Virginia publicly says things, and that doesn't implicate the entire Democratic Party. I mean, or Zoran Mamdani is going to be your New York mayor, and that dude is just openly pro-terrorism. Like, obviously there is a difference. This Politico story, which is gaining all sorts of traction, is not in fact comparable to actual people running for high office in Virginia or in New York City or the Democratic Party at high levels engaging with this sort of nonsense. Third, when you're asked about somebody saying a bad thing, whether you're right or you're left, of course you ought to condemn the bad thing that is being said. I don't even understand the logic of not doing that. Are you obligated to defend the bad thing being said because the person who is questioning you is somehow, quote unquote, on the other side? Because that's precisely how you get to a left that defends Jay Jones. That's how you get there. That's how you get to a left that openly defends Zoran Mamdani. Fourth, forgiveness ought to be easily obtained, as I've said. But if you want forgiveness, you actually ought to ask for it. You actually ought to dissociate from the things that you say. I was saying stuff that was dumb. I got caught up in the edgelord moment online. Like, whatever it is. But this sort of preemptive forgiveness that people are willing to grant to their own side, you only get out of jail free if you ask to do so. You don't get it just because, like, preemptively. So you say something terrible, or you do something terrible, and people just preemptively forgive you. All that is an incentivization to do more of that thing. And I will say, finally, it actually is not sufficient to publicly proclaim you're not going to condemn these people while you don't say anything about their comments and instead just project to the other side. Because strategically, on a strategic level, this is how your party ends up being taken over by the ambulatory psychotics. Okay, I want to look at the left because that's how it happened. The left decided they would not, under any circumstances, condemn their own ambulatory psychotics because those people were part of their coalition and they couldn't do it or they would lose. And you know what ended up happening? The alligator ate them first, not last. They ended up being taken over by the crazy wing. Because if you lose your systemic immunity to crazy, crazy tends to be really, really, really infectious. Okay, first of all, let's just be clear about something. There's this weird idea on the right that the left wins because they're totally unified and they completely side with one another. The left is not winning. I know that we are sort of a depressive right, that we've gotten addicted to the depressive. The left is not winning. Donald Trump has been president those times, 2 times. Republicans are in control of the Senate. Republicans are in control of the House. Republicans are in control of the majority of governors' mansions. Republicans are in control of a majority of state legislatures. The left is not winning because of their unity. They're being destroyed because of the thing I'm talking about happening on the right. Because they decided that the nut jobs and the radicals in their own party could not be condemned under any circumstances. They decided to feature Ilhan Omar on the cover of magazines and unite around the crazy college protesters and the BLM rioters and the transgender radicals. And guess what? They got their asses kicked because of it. Yes, they didn't expel people from their party, but moderates walked away. The non-crazy walked away. This is the dirty little secret of how Donald Trump won the election of 2024. He ran as a moderate. People who were moderate picked him above the unified left that was siding with all of their radicals and defending all of their radicals and massaging all of their radicals. Because it turns out this is a very big country with an awful lot of people, and the vast majority of them are not loon bags. And the vast majority of them don't like the lunacy. And beyond that, we need to be real about the agenda of many of the people who are continuing to rely on the kindness of the quote-unquote traditional Republicans who quote-unquote don't want to attack right. Marjorie Taylor Greene is dividing the Republican Party, not the people criticizing Marjorie Taylor Greene. She is attacking the president day in and day out. Who's dividing the party? The people who mention it or Marjorie Taylor Greene? Marjorie Taylor Greene spent the last 24 hours ripping into Republican men. For example, Marjorie Taylor Greene, apparently, she tore into her party and said GOP men in the Congress are quote-unquote weak. Apparently, and now she's getting this media blitz from the left while torching Speaker Johnson, torching Donald Trump, accusing Donald Trump of a cover-up over Epstein. Quote, whereas President Trump has a very strong dominant style, he's not weak at all. A lot of the men here in the House are weak, Green said. There's a lot of weak Republican men, and they're more afraid of strong Republican women. So they always try to marginalize the strong Republican women that actually want to do something and actually want to achieve. Sure, that must be it. It can't be that you've been out there day and night getting the strange new respect from the left by attacking Trump over his foreign and domestic policy while engaging in the most rudimentary, conspiratorial nonsense. If you point that out, are you the divider, or is it Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's busy taking victory laps on CNN? When people keep trotting out folks like Alex Jones, and the idea is that if you don't, quote unquote, unite with Alex Jones, somehow you're undermining the party. It's Alex Jones who's torching members of the Trump administration. I mean, here's Alex Jones on Tucker Carlson's show, torching, in order, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and Dan Bongino. Who's the one who's dividing things? Who's the one attacking the president's policy? Who's the one who's shooting inside the tent, by the way? I'm getting rather tired of this idea that everybody who is not on the sort of extreme wing of the conspiratorial right, those are the ones who are wrecking the party by not accepting the extreme wing of the conspiratorial right that is constantly attacking inside the party. It's a wild supposition. Here is Alex Jones. This is, again, within the last 48 hours.
From what I've heard, Bondi's not bad. She's just lazy. Bongino's emotional and a big baby. Patel is compromised. And it's just so sad.
I mean, like, I just have to wonder, is that, who's dividing? Who's the big divider? Again, politics is a coalitional business, and people can vote for whomever they want. But the question now is not about voting. The question right now is about who gets to define the message and the future of the Republican Party. That's an ongoing battle all the time. That's an ongoing battle on the right. And if you don't call this stuff out, you end up with the right-wing version of AOC running your party. So yes, obviously, when it comes to the political party, when it comes to the Republican Party, when it comes to the conservative movement, some standards must be applied because the standards end somewhere. So the question is, which standard gets applied? How broad should that standard be? How much should certain people be respected who are trying to seize leadership of that standard and carry the banner forward? Anti-left is an electoral strategy. But we are not talking here about an electoral strategy. We are talking about who gets to lead the movement, how that should be dealt with, how bad ideas ought to be condemned. And if you're not willing to do that on your own side, then frankly, I don't have a lot of respect for you when you're attacking the other side for doing it. I don't think it's equivalent on both sides. I do not believe that the permission structures for violence on the right are the same as the permission structures for violence on the left. I don't think that they go as deep. I don't think that they're as pervasive. And I don't think on a raw level, they're as creative of as much violence in the moment right now. But the notion that your moral obligation to call out bad behavior and violent language and ugly stuff ends at the political river, that is a great way for a republic to fall apart, because then there is no trust. Then there is no trust. What is the common rule that applies to everyone? Then it's the law for my enemies. For my friends, everything. For my enemies, the law. Right? And at that point, you can't have a functional republic. You really, really can't. And as I say, the left is engaged in this stuff full time. I don't understand the practical argument, by the way, that the left is winning because of it, because they clearly are not. But I mean, the left is engaged in this full time, which is why Zohran Mamdani is likely to be the next mayor of New York City. Get some more on this in a moment. First, this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right actually gets you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. In tonight's NFL game, Pittsburgh versus Cincinnati, producer Jake picked Aaron Rodgers to have more than 219.5 passing yards, and for Jordan Love to have less than 9.5 rushing yards. I feel like those are pretty good picks. Jake loves how easy and quick it is to use the app. Prize Picks is the daily fantasy app that makes football even more exciting by letting you create lineups in less than a minute. Just choose more or less on at least 2 player projections, and you are now in the game. This season brings something brand new. Stacks, the only feature that lets you select the same player up to 3 times in one lineup. So, if you're confident in a quarterback's passing, rushing, and touchdowns, you can put all of those projections together with options like Flex Play for added wiggle room or Power Play for bigger potential payouts, plus features like injury reboot boots that protect your lineup if a player leaves early, Prize Picks puts you in control. Available in over 40 states with fast and secure deposits through Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more. It's America's #1 fantasy sports app for a reason. Download that Prize Picks app today. Use code BEN to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code BEN to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Also, you can't always count on big institutions to prioritize your health, so it's up to you to take charge. With liver health concerns on the rise across the United States every year, Dose for Your Liver is one of the simplest ways to protect and support your liver. Unlike capsules or powders, Dose is a liquid supplement you take as a quick 2-ounce daily shot. It tastes like fresh squeezed orange juice. Your liver is one of the hardest working organs in your body. You have to give it the help it deserves. Your liver acts like a filter. It works behind the scenes on over 500 essential functions every single day, helping with your digestion, energy production, fat metabolism, even storing important vitamins. When your liver's running smoothly, you're going to feel the difference in your daily rhythm. Dose is formulated to support your liver's day-to-day function, helping it handle unwanted elements so it can keep doing its job with ease. With 0 sugar, 0 calories, 0 junk, it's a simple addition you can feel good about, and you will feel better. With clinical studies backing its impact on liver health markers, Dose is grounded in real science, not guesswork. So why not give your liver the daily support it deserves? New customers can save 35% on your first month of subscription by going to dosedaily.co/Shapiro or entering Shapiro at checkout. That's dosedaily.co/Shapiro for 35% off your first month subscription. Apparently, there's going to be a debate between Zohar Mamdani and Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa this evening. Sliwa, really is sort of the complicating factor in the race right now. If it comes down to Cuomo and Mamdani, Cuomo has a sort of outsider shot at the mayoralty. According to the New York Post, Cuomo and Sliwa will come to the crucial face-off bearing fresh evidence the socialist frontrunner is unfit to be dog catcher, let alone mayor of New York. This is Michael Goodwin writing for the New York Post. That smoking gun is Mamdani's outrageous reaction to the end of the war in Gaza and the return of 20 living Israeli hostages. His Monday statement never mentioned the Hamas invasion of Israel on October 7th, 2023, an effort that can only be described as a putrid whitewash of the slaughter and infanticide that marked the deadliest day for the Jews since the Holocaust. He also didn't mention President Trump's heroic efforts to bring peace, lest it trigger a mass outbreak of Trump derangement syndrome among his radical camp followers. He smeared Israel. He smeared the United States. He said that our tax dollars are funding a genocide. Mamdani, he has refused to condemn bloodlust by his fellow Muslims. It's on par with his previous refusal to condemn the phrase globalize the intifada. According to Michael Goodwin, Mamdani still has not denounced the butchers of Hamas, even as they just murder people wholesale on the streets in Gaza. It is truly an amazing thing that all the people who decried the condition of Gazans have gone totally silent when it's Hamas doing the killing. But that's the Democratic Party. So I'm just asking Republicans, why would you want to copy that? Why would that look like a good strategy to you, either morally or pragmatically? My answer is it isn't. Meanwhile, for his part, President Trump is promising to cut off federal funding for New York City if Mamdani is elected.
The funding for New York and for every place comes through the White House. And I'm very generous, and I was always very generous with New York, even when you had opposition there, but I was always very generous. But I wouldn't be generous to a communist, a guy that's going to take the money and throw it out the window, because you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. And we're not going to let somebody get into office and squander the taxpayer money from this country. We're not going to let it happen.
Yeah, again, I think that is perfectly legitimate, actually. I mean, taxpayer money at the federal level very frequently comes with strings attached. Trump also mocked Elizabeth Warren for praising Mamdani.
We've been criticized by a couple of American Peronists, like Senator Warren. She and
That's a compliment.
Yeah.
She has no idea what she's doing. She's a nasty, horrible senator. Go ahead. Other than that, I like her very much.
I mean, fair. Okay, meanwhile, President Trump on the foreign policy front continues to maintain that it's time for Hamas to disarm. So obviously, I'm in Jerusalem for the Jewish holidays, be coming home soon. Can't wait to get home. President Trump, he came to the Israeli parliament. He gave a barn burner of a speech in which he said that Hamas would be demilitarized, disarmed. Well, President Trump has doubled down on that. Here's President Trump.
We have told them we want to disarm. and they will disarm. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. And it'll happen quickly and perhaps violently. But they will disarm. Do you understand me?
Yes, you say
because
quickly.
everyone says, oh, well, they won't disarm. They will disarm. And I spoke to Hamas, and I said, you're going to disarm, right? Yes, sir, we're going to disarm. That's what they told me. They will disarm or we will disarm them. Got it?
Okay, well, we'll find out whether that comes true or not. Somebody is going to have to disarm Hamas because Hamas has launched a massively violent crackdown in the Gaza Strip. Hamas is effectively going house to house now, eliminating all of its possible rivals in what remains of its possible sphere of control. According to the Wall Street Journal, a fight between Hamas and other armed Palestinian groups in the Gaza Strip is now underway. Hamas has surged forces in behind the Israeli troops leaving. So the entire world pressured Israel to leave these areas. And as soon as Israel left the areas, Hamas rushed in and began murdering people. And the entire world is apparently still silent about that, except for President Trump. Clashes around a hospital in Gaza City on Sunday left dozens dead. Well, that's weird. I'm old enough to remember, because I am more than 5 minutes old, when any sort of violence done around hospitals, even if those hospitals were being used as Hamas bases, was considered some sort of massive war violation. And yet, here I'm learning that there were clashes literally around a hospital in Gaza City, leaving dozens dead, according to the Hamas unit that conducted the raid and members of the family it was fighting. And videos show Hamas fighters dragging a number of men from the family into the public square in broad daylight, forcing them to kneel and then shooting them in the head in front of a crowd of onlookers. And that's so weird, because all the people who are saying genocide, it's so terrible what's happening in Gaza, they've gone totally, utterly silent as Hamas simply drives around the Gaza Strip, finding enemies and shooting them in the head. It's so strange. It's so weird. According to Hassan Abu Hania, an independent analyst based in Amman, specializing in Islamist groups, Hamas is reestablishing control. Hamas will be even more aggressive now to prove to the outside world no one can remove them, no force can challenge them. Now, remember, that happened because the entire world decided that somehow the members of Hamas were the victims in this particular conflict. And it was only because President Trump was capable of mobilizing the entire world to pressure Hamas into releasing 20 live Israeli hostages that happened in the first place. So it remains to be seen how the rest of the Gaza plan will work out. But the President of the United States is obviously now heavily invested in a strategy of peace through strength, which is exactly what he said in front of the Israeli parliament. This is precisely the right policy when it comes to foreign policy. So it is not particularly surprising that President Trump is now set to meet with Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky to discuss air defense and long-range capabilities, according to the Express out of the UK. There is talk that the President of the United States is going to be sending long-range Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. That does need to happen. The reason that the war in Gaza came to a successful conclusion for Israel, and again, what happens next is unclear, is because Hamas was so militarily pressured that they were left with no other choices. Every possible base of support was removed, up to and including the Qataris, who learned over the course of the last 6 weeks that they were not immune from Israeli assault inside their borders against members of Hamas. President Trump, according to the Express, has hinted at the possibility of sending Tomahawks to Kyiv if Putin continues to obstruct any chance of peace talks. And the president has recently increased intelligence sharing with Ukrainian forces to enhance long-range attacks on Russian energy infrastructure, intensifying the pressure on Russia's struggling economy. This is, by the way, again, the right strategy. In more good foreign policy, the president of the United States has said that the United States will be attempting to grant loans to Argentina, but apparently only if Javier Milei's party wins the elections. That's not outside political manipulation. That's just called good economics. If Milei's party does not win the elections, if Milei looks as though he is somehow on shaky footing, investment into Argentina will stop dead. The only reason people are investing in Argentina right now is because they believe that they're not going to get a Kirchner-right government that simply seizes and nationalizes the mechanisms of production and takes away the resources people invest in that country. So speaking of Argentina, I asked our sponsors over at Comet, a project of perplexity, about Argentina. How many times have they gone bankrupt over the course of the last century? And according to Comet, Argentina has gone bankrupt, meaning it has defaulted on its sovereign debt 9 times over the last century, making it one of the countries with the most frequent defaults in modern economic history. Virtually all of those were since 1950, 1951, 56, 82, 89, 2001, 2014. 2019 was a technical or selective default, and 2020 And if you go all the way back to the 1890s, it happened in 1890 as well. So again, that is just because of bad economic policy, and Milei is trying to correct all of that. According to the Wall Street Journal, President Trump has directly tied the $20 billion lifeline the United States is extending to Argentina to President Javier Milei's success in the coming midterm elections. Trump said, if he loses, we're not going to be generous with Argentina, because if he doesn't win, we're gone. Which, by the way, is just a description of reality. That is not even leverage being used against some sort of foreign adversary. Why would you invest in the economy that has gone bankrupt a dozen times? If Milei is not solidly embedded in the economic future of Argentina, there's no reason anyone is going to be investing money in Argentina right now. Here is President Trump talking about the Argentina bailout.
So I've been here now almost 9 months, but when I just came in, I was amazed to see how poorly we've done. We lost so many, and one of them was Argentina, would be lost if he wasn't there. And I think he will be there because the people recognize he's done an amazing job. He took over a real mess. So did I take over a mess. I took over a mess by, the Biden group. And Obama he started it. I'll tell you, Barack Hussein Obama started it.
The President of the United States is not wrong. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said it is, quote, much better to form an economic bridge with our allies and end up with people who want to do the right thing than have to be shooting narco gunboats, which was a reference to boats the United States is targeting off the coast of Venezuela. As President Trump met with Javier Milei, it was announced that the U.S. military had struck a fifth alleged drug smuggling vessel, killing 6 people. Javier Milei, for his part, thanked President Trump and Secretary of Treasury Bessent, saying that Bessent had helped the country, quote, overcome this liquidity problem that Argentina had as a result of political attacks. So again, this is good foreign policy. It just is. And making it dependent on the continued durability of the Milei regime is the smart play. Meanwhile, all the talk about President Trump's economy grinding to a halt, that seems like that is not happening. According to the Wall Street Journal, Wall Street continues to fire on all cylinders. Deal-making, trading, and corporate lending are gaining steam and fueling profits at the nation's largest banks, with Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo all beating third-quarter profit and revenue forecasts. Goldman is now on pace for its best year ever in its main investment banking and markets division. JP Morgan is on track to make over $50 billion in annual profit for the second year in a row. BlackRock is sitting on a record $13.5 trillion in assets under management. Now, maybe this is a bubble. Maybe it is people trading and borrowing in order to buy even more securities. Maybe all of it is moving toward AI. Maybe the volatility eventually will tell. But for the moment, that is not true. For the moment, that is not what is happening. Again, the trade wars could restart again. There was a stock market dump just a few days ago when the president seemed to be starting another trade war with China over China's unwillingness to send a wide variety of rare earth minerals to the United States. But there's also the possibility the Supreme Court strikes down a lot of these tariffs, saying it's not within the purview of the executive, and suddenly you have a free trading regime, lower taxes, less regulation, and then the economy takes off. All of that is quite possible, actually, and depends on whether the Supreme Court, I think, properly rules that the president does not have the unilateral power to simply increase tariffs as he sees fit. Meanwhile, Jerome Powell left the central bank on track to reduce interest rates again at its meeting later this month, highlighting weaknesses in the job market despite lingering concerns over sticky inflation. Powell says the central bank is trying to balance against 2 risks that could call for competing policy steps. He's afraid if he cuts rates too quickly, then inflation will continue to be higher than 2%. But moving too slowly to reduce borrowing costs could spur painful losses in the employment market. So it seems as though President Trump is going to get what he wants, which means he owns the economy from here on out. Blaming Joe Biden ain't going to help at this point. So it's either going to be a strong economy and MAGA winning into the future, or a weak economy, in which case the country is in an awful lot of trouble. Meanwhile, no sign of any end to the government shutdown in sight. Democrats keep saying they want to reopen the government, but actually do not want to reopen the government. The House Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, he says, we'd love to reopen the government, but in order to do that, basically, we need to undo everything that Trump has done over the last year. Good luck with that.
Well, our position from the very beginning is that we want to sit down, have a bipartisan discussion. Now we want to reopen the government, enact a spending agreement that actually makes life better for the American people and addresses the Republican healthcare crisis that is devastating people all across the country, working class Americans, middle class Americans, as well as everyday Americans.
again, I'm not sure what they're aiming for here. I guess just to drive down the economy, but the economy seems to be shrugging off the government shutdown as well it should. Meanwhile, I guess Democrats are left with just yelling at Trump or clacking their dentures at President Trump, as Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House, has been doing. She's out there, again, making the rounds. Unconvincing, here she is with Jen Psaki over at MSNBC.
President Trump is the worst president in American history for America's children. He's taking food out of their mouths, but the SNAP program, health care away from them, education, children with special needs, just reducing the number of people who work there from over 100 to barely 20 for children with special needs. And he's, on top of it all, giving them $4 trillion in national debt to pay for.
I'm sorry. I'm like, no one believes Nancy Pelosi at this point. Good luck to the Democrats. I mean, truly. The only way the Democrats are able to claw their way back to power is, one, an economic collapse, or two, the right loses its mind. If you're wondering why I'm very anti the right losing its mind, it's not just because of the moral. It is also because of the pragmatic. If the right loses its mind, then the right is in electoral trouble. And that means the left takes over. And that is a very, very bad thing. Alrighty, coming up, we're going to jump into the vaunted Ben Shapiro Show mailbag. Remember, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us. More Epstein emails drop and the media go insane. But is there any there? Plus, we'll get to the government shutdown, President Trump's affordability pitch, and much more. First, we had 10,000 lifetime memberships when we launched. Fewer than 2,000 remain. One payment, all access for life. And just a reminder, lifetime memberships will never go on sale. Go to dailywire.com/lifetime to lock yours in today. Also, our new live show, Friendly Fire, returns next Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern on Daily Wire Plus. Join Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Andrew Klavan, and me as we do what we do best: debate, discuss, disagree on the biggest stories in politics and culture. Plus, we are world premiering the first official trailer for the Pendragon cycle, Rise of the Merlin. Don't miss it. Friendly Fire, next Wednesday, November 19th at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on Daily Wire Plus. Alrighty, folks. Well, it is a brand new day, and that means it's time for more Epstein revelations. Now, the reason these Epstein revelations are happening is really because there was a discharge petition that was put forward late last night in the House of Representatives, signed on to by several stray Republicans, rogue Republicans, some of whom are very much oriented against the Trump administration, in order to shame President Trump by saying that there ought to be a widespread release of more documents. And in a little while, we will get to what exactly this discharge petition would do, even if it were passed in the House and then passed again in the Senate, which, again, is likely to die in the Senate. But Democrats had to chum the waters. They had to make everybody interested in Epstein again. So they decided to do this in their usual fashion, which is to selectively release 3 emails. 3. Now, Republicans then responded by releasing 20,000 emails, but Democrats released 3. And this was supposed to be a shame tactic directed at President Trump that was going to demonstrate full scale that he was in Jeffrey Epstein's pocket, or that Jeffrey Epstein was blackmailing Donald Trump, or that Jeffrey Epstein had untoward material about Trump, which is why Trump has been so reluctant to allow for the release of more materials. Now, the reason that President Trump has said that he is not into the release of more materials is he says there are already tens of thousands of pages of materials out there. And courts have already barred the release of an enormous number of these materials on the basis of victim protection. And the FBI is doing the same. And so you can yell and scream about it as much as you want, but these discharge petitions, these attempts to pry more documents out, they are likely to fail even on the court level. So really what this is, according to President Trump, an attempt to, by implication, humiliate him. And it really does feel like that based on what Democrats did yesterday. So Democrats dropped 3 emails. These 3 emails were, shall we say, less than edifying with regard to the broad conspiracy theories that have been put out there about Jeffrey Epstein. Now, as I've said 1,000 times, there are true, open, honest questions to be asked about Jeffrey Epstein. How did he make all of his money? Where did all that money come from? Why was one media mogul paying him something like $158 million to do his taxes and look for tax breaks? Why was another mogul giving him access to a $70 million home in Manhattan, right? These are very real questions that require very real answers. Instead, the entire realm has been filled with the most outlandish speculation. The sort of full case that you have heard retailed in public by many prominent figures is the idea that Jeffrey Epstein was running a child sex trafficking ring, not on behalf of himself, in which he preyed on underage girls. That was the thing that Ghislaine Maxwell is in jail for. The thing she is in jail for is that she helped Jeffrey Epstein procure underage girls for him to violate. For him to violate. And not for Bill Clinton to violate or Donald Trump to violate or random public figures to violate, for Jeffrey Epstein to violate. Right? That is why Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison. That's what she was convicted of. That's what the accusations were. That has been blown into a broader conspiracy involving the idea that Jeffrey Epstein brought in a bunch of underage girls and a bunch of prominent people and then blackmailed them after taking tapes of them and pictures of them. There is no evidence to this effect. Michael Tracy, who's been all over this for years, a journalist with whom I frequently disagree, he has done a very good job digging into the details here. And there's not evidence to the effect that that was happening, that he was trafficking on behalf of third parties as opposed to on behalf of himself. Now, again, that doesn't answer the question as to where all this money was coming from a couple of figures in particular. Was he blackmailing those guys? Sure, that could be. But as far as Donald Trump or Bill Clinton or any of the other wide variety of figures who have been mentioned in connection with this, unless you have evidence, it's very difficult to make claims about them. And then that has been blown into an even bigger conspiracy theory that basically Jeffrey Epstein was a foreign agent acting on behalf of a foreign power, honey trapping these guys in order to blackmail them to change policy. And again, the evidence of that just doesn't exist. If it did, Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, the president, the vice president, they would have an obligation to tell you that. But they're telling you the opposite. And so again, I ask, where is the evidence? Speculation, it's a free country. You can speculate, but stop pretending that speculation is evidence. Okay, so that's the backdrop of all of this. So Democrats are trying to underscore allegations that basically Donald Trump was being blackmailed by Jeffrey Epstein by releasing 3 emails. Republicans then responded by dumping 20,000 emails into the public view, some of which are embarrassing for people like Larry Summers, who had a weird relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, just kind of on a personal level. But the supposedly embarrassing emails involving Donald Trump, there's no there. All right, we'll get into the exact content of the emails that have been released in just a moment. First, here's the irony. Our military fights for our overseas freedom, while over here at home, some of those freedoms are going away. Your phone's listening. Tech companies are tracking every click you make. They're profiting off your private data. All perfectly legally, by the way. Fighting for freedom isn't just a military job. We have to protect ourselves as well, which is why I use ExpressVPN every day. ExpressVPN routes all your online activity through secure encrypted servers, so data brokers, tech companies, and government agencies can't even see what you're doing. And here's the proof. In the last year alone, ExpressVPN received over 400,000 data requests from governments and corporations wanting user data. They handed over exactly 0. Why? Well, they have a strict zero logs policy. They literally don't have your data to share. It takes one click to turn on, works on everything from your phone to your smart TV, and you can protect up to 14 devices all at once, which means your whole family gets protected with one account. And whenever I'm traveling, I'm using public Wi-Fi. That means that I need to be protected because, listen, my data is my business. Sometimes the best defense is just taking back control of your privacy, and that starts with ExpressVPN. Right now, get an extra 4 months when you use my special link. Go to expressvpn.com/Ben. Get 4 extra months of ExpressVPN. That's expressvpn.com/Ben. Also, a recent Danish study found something deeply concerning. Just 1 year after an abortion, women were 50% more likely to need psychiatric treatment and 87% more likely to experience personality or behavioral disorders. Those aren't just stats. They represent real women facing real struggles. That's why Preborn takes a different approach. When a woman walks through their doors uncertain and afraid, she finds something she may not have expected, genuine support. Through an ultrasound, she meets her baby for the first time, and suddenly, what felt like an impossible situation begins to look like something different. But Preborn doesn't stop there. When a woman chooses life, they walk alongside her for up to 2 years, providing practical help like maternity clothes and diapers, as well as ongoing counseling and emotional support. It's care for the whole person, addressing her physical needs, her mental health, and her future. As you think about your year-end giving, consider the greatest investment you could ever make, the gift of life. Dial pound 250, say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 baby, or visit preborn.com/Ben. All gifts are tax deductible. Preborn is a 5-star rated charity. That's preborn.com/Ben to make a difference for generations to come. So email number 1 was an email from Jeffrey Epstein, apparently to his lawyer, saying, quote, "I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump." This is April 2nd, 2011. So long before Donald Trump was even a gleam in the eye of American presidential politics in a serious way. "I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Redaction," and then it says victim, "spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned. Police chief, etc. I'm 75% there." Okay, so there is one major problem with this particular revelation. what the Democrats did here is they redacted the name of the person because supposedly it was protection for the victim. I mean, it literally says in the document, it's a redaction, so it's a piece of black marking, and over it is printed victim. Who's the victim? The victim here is apparently Virginia Giuffre. Virginia Giuffre was a very unstable person. She passed away recently. She was considered such an unstable personality, the prosecutors could not use her in the case against Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell. Not only that, but in a sworn deposition, Virginia Giuffre literally said that she was never mistreated by Donald Trump. So if you just read that email out of context, it would sound as though Virginia Giuffre was trafficked to Donald Trump, if you wanted to read that totally out of context. But that's not what the email says, and that's not what the email means, and we have counter evidence with regard to this particular person. And again, very cynical move by Democrats to redact the name there and then put victim. Not because Virginia Giuffre wasn't a victim of someone. She may very well have been victimized by Prince Andrew. But because we know who she is publicly. Also, she's dead. So there's no more victim protection. So according to, again, a deposition, there's a deposition with Virginia Giuffre. She said, Donald Trump was also a good friend of Jeffrey's. That part is true. He didn't partake in any sex with us, but he flirted with me. It's true he didn't partake in any sex with us. But it's not true that he flirted with me. Donald Trump never flirted with me. This is Virginia Giuffre, the purported victim from this email with Epstein. Okay, so again, like the basic idea here, which is that Donald Trump was somehow victimizing Giuffre, that's not true. Democrats put out the email cynically and then redacted the name of the victim to make it look like there was a victim here who is not Virginia Giuffre victimized by President Trump. Not true. Okay, second email is an email from Jeffrey Epstein to the execrable Michael Wolff, who, by the way, it should be noted, was basically doing PR on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein. Right? Michael Wolff is the author who is constantly writing these extremely sleazy and half-accurate tomes about what's going on in the Trump administration or the White House or whatever. And you can never believe what he has to say because he does make things up on a fairly routine basis, it appears. Well, he was doing defense for Jeffrey Epstein, which shows you what kind of a human he is, because Jeffrey Epstein was a piece of shit. Well, Jeffrey Epstein apparently wrote to Michael Wolff, victim, Mar-a-Lago, redaction. Right? So redaction, Mar-a-Lago, redaction. Trump said he asked me to resign. Never a member ever. Of course, he knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop. So if he asked Ghislaine to stop, I don't understand why that's bad for Trump. So they released this email to make it sound like Trump knew about the girls. He knew about, well, I mean, this email is 2019, January 2019. So Donald Trump, according to Trump, threw Epstein out of his club because he knew that he was acting in nefarious ways. Now, Donald Trump was not a criminal prosecutor, so I'm not sure what exactly that proves precisely, because he cut off his relationship with Epstein. So is that supposed to be indicting of Trump? If so, in what way? Okay, then there was an email from Michael Wolff. This is December 15th, 2015. These are the only three emails that Democrats released. And again, they released them in order to sort of imply things about Trump without actually saying them. And this is one of the things that's deeply annoying about our current politics, is that people are never asked to actually say the thing they appear to be saying. Instead, they just sort of imply, and then they back away, and then they imply some more, and then they back away. If you want to say it, just say it. Seriously, it's a free country. You can say it, and then we can all judge you by what you are actually claiming. So Democrats put out this third email from December 15th, 2015. Michael Wolff wrote, I hear CNN planning to ask Trump tonight about his relationship with you, either on air or in scrum afterward. And Epstein wrote back, if we were able to craft an answer for him, what do you think it should be? And Wolff wrote back, I think you should let him hang himself. If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the House, then that gives you a valuable PR and political currency. You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you. Or if it really looks like he could win, you could save him, generating a debt. Of course, it is possible that when asked, he'll say Jeffrey is a great guy and has gotten a raw deal and is a victim of political correctness, which is to be outlawed in a Trump regime. Okay, so the proof here, supposedly, is that Michael Wolff, who is a purveyor of many untruths, said to Jeffrey Epstein, not the other way around, said to Jeffrey Epstein that you should hold over Trump's head the idea that maybe he's been on the plane or to the House. So you should blackmail Trump, basically. Again, I'm not sure what this is supposed to prove. Like, what exactly does this prove? Okay, so Democrats released these 3 emails, and it was supposed to be terrible for Trump. Oh my gosh. And then you read them and you're like, I don't see it, man. I just don't. So Republicans on the House Oversight Committee then decided to swamp Democrats by saying, listen, you want to release 3? We'll release 20,000. So the emails released by the Republicans include an exchange in which Epstein wrote, I know how dirty Donald is. But what he is saying in that email has to do not with Virginia Giuffre or any of the other purported victims. It has to do with what Donald Trump did with regard to Stormy Daniels. That's the context. So what are we? Is this a revelation that Donald Trump, was doing catch and kill stories with the National Enquirer with regard to people like Stormy? I mean, like, what's the revelation? We've known all of this. Is there anything new here? The answer is no. Right? This is an email exchange between one Kathy Rumler and Epstein, in which Epstein wrote, quote, I think he makes the argument it was Trump's money, making it not illegal, though he also said he only found out afterwards, and the fact, according to the indictment, was billed as services rendered and grossed up. I'm sure his account has flipped anyway. I did talk in detail to Ken Starr yesterday, re-indictments, how Trump can make a deal, special counsel, Clinton's trash can. Yes, Starr gave me more. Yuck. And then he replied to Kathy Rumler saying, you see, I know how dirty Donald is. My guess is that non-lawyers, New York biz people have no idea what it means to have your fixer flip. Okay, so he's talking just about the fact that Michael Epstein was basically Trump's fixer, which we already knew, of course. So, again, I'm not sure where is the there? Where is the there? Okay, then there's another exchange that, again, was released by the Republicans. There's another exchange here in which Epstein revealed that he had photos of Trump with bikini-clad young women in his kitchen and named a couple of them. The couple of them that he named are overage, meaning they're adult women. So is the revelation that Donald Trump likes to be around adult women in bathing suits in the 1990s? What is the revelation here? We know all of this. There is nothing new here. So, again, all of this is much ado about nothing, at least the stuff that has been released thus far. But the idea here was to sort of chum the waters in order to generate support for the idea that hiding behind the next documentary corner, the next tranche will be the thing. It's starting to feel a lot like Russiagate, where CNN was running a breaking Russiagate story every single day. The next thing that happens, you will get the smoking gun that Donald Trump was paid by Vladimir Putin. And so now Democrats and some rogue Republicans who do not like Trump and want to hurt his administration, they are joining forces in order to try and drive down his approval ratings with the suggestion, unevidenced, that Donald Trump engaged in illegal activities with Jeffrey Epstein. And that's the reason why Trump doesn't want these documents released. Now, again, there could be nefarious reasons why Trump doesn't want the documents released. Could be that there's something in there that he knows is bad or embarrassing for him or embarrassing to a friend. Maybe that's the reason. Okay, but you have provided zero evidence. Again, there are tens of thousands of documents here. You have provided zero evidence to the effect that Donald Trump did anything illegal here. And in fact, you've provided some evidence that he and Epstein had a falling out. And yet somehow this was the big headline yesterday. The big headline. Epstein, by the way, was trying to find any way that he could to basically monetize his one-time relationship with Trump. Apparently, he wrote in a June 24th, 2018 email to a former prime minister of Norway, quote, I think you might suggest to Putin that Lavrov can get insight on talking to me. That if you want to understand Trump, you can talk to me. But that does not mean that he was going to offer them some sort of compromat on Trump. Again, there's just no there so far. Caroline Leavitt, she was at the White House yesterday. She said, again, there's no evidence Trump did anything wrong. She's not wrong. That's true.
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong. And what President Trump has always said is that he was from Palm Beach, and so was Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a member at Mar-a-Lago until President Trump kicked him out because Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile and he was a creep.
Okay, so again, that is true. That is true. President Trump responded on Truth Social. He put out a statement saying, quote, the Democrats are trying to bring up the Jeffrey Epstein hoax again because they'll do anything at all to deflect on how badly they've done on the shutdown and so many other subjects. Only a very bad or stupid Republican would fall into that trap. The Democrats cost our country $1.5 trillion with their recent antics of viciously closing our country, while at the same time putting many at risk, and they should pay a fair price. There should be no deflections to Epstein or anything else, and any Republicans involved should be focused only on opening up our country and fixing the massive damage caused by the Democrats. Already coming up, who exactly is targeting President Trump and why on all of this? Why are some Republicans going after President Trump? Well, there's a reason. You know what's funny? When I started Daily Wire, we thought the hard part would be creating great content. It turns out that dealing with all that behind-the-scenes stuff, the hiring, HR policies, employee issues, that's the stuff that really eats up your time. I know I'm not alone. When you're a business owner, every second of your time is incredibly valuable. So don't waste your energy and risk losing money dealing with time-sucking payroll issues, office politics, and HR infractions. Focus on the stuff that matters most, running your business with help from Bambee. Here's what makes Bambee different. They give you access to your very own dedicated HR manager at a fraction of what it costs to employ somebody full-time. And get this, Bambee costs just $29 a month, whether you have 10, 75, even 100 employees. If I had Bambee when I was first building my team, it would have saved me countless hours and headaches. Instead of getting bogged down with paperwork, compliance issues, I could have focused on growing my show and connecting with my audience. With Bambee's HR Autopilot, you'll never have to waste your valuable time getting into the weeds of HR policies, onboarding, terminations. Plus, Bambee is month-to-month, no hidden fees. You can cancel anytime. Right now, get 1 month of Bambee for just $1. Go to Bambee.com, type in Ben Shapiro under podcast to schedule your first call with an HR manager right now. That's 1 month of Bambee for just $1 at BAMBEE.com, Ben Shapiro podcast. Also, recently I learned that over 4 billion pounds of meat were imported into the United States last year. They can still be labeled product of the USA. If labels can be misleading about something as basic as where the meat comes from, what else don't you know about what you're buying? That's why Good Ranchers is taking over the game with quality meat you can trust, all born and raised right here on American soil. Half my staff is basically living off of Good Ranchers at this point, and their children. And I got to say, we're growing like big kids here in the office. My kids are like shrimps compared to some of the kids in this office because my kids eat kosher, but Good Ranchers, apparently, you grow linebackers. Locally sourced from American family farms and ranches, 100% American meat, delivered straight to your door. You can also pause or delay boxes anytime. It is super flexible. So here's the deal. All new subscribers to any Good Ranchers box using code Ben will get an additional $100 off your first 3 orders, $40 off your first, $30 off your second, $30 off your third, and free meat for life when you subscribe. So hit up GoodRanchers.com this holiday season full of delicious meals. Again, use code Ben. That's GoodRanchers.com. Let's get back to the table. Now, again, the real problem for President Trump here is that most people, I think, when they look at this sort of stuff, their immediate response is, why didn't you just let them release everything? Just let them release everything. And the response of the DOJ and the FBI has been, we have released pretty much everything. There's not much more to release. And the stuff that has not been released is under court seal, which again is true. And here is where we get into the vagaries of the discharge petition. So yesterday, after the House of Representatives reopened, Representative Adelita Grijalva of Arizona became the 218th and final signature on the discharge petition. She joined all the other Democrats as well as 4 Republicans, including 2 who hate President Trump and would like to destroy his presidency. That would be Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene, as well as Lauren Boebert and Nancy Mace. Grijalva signed the petition on the House floor immediately, and 2 Epstein survivors looked on from the gallery. Later on Wednesday, Speaker Johnson said he would bring the Epstein bill for a vote in the House next week. Without cooperation from GOP leadership, the earliest a vote would have happened under the discharge petition process was early December due to waiting periods under the process. So he's basically saying, we know it's going to pass, so we may as well just bring it up right now. And then it will go to the Senate. And very likely in the Senate, it will die. Because, again, the Senate has no interest. The Republicans in the Senate have no interest in playing this kind of dumb game. So the reason I say it's a dumb game is because we have to ask what this discharge petition would actually do. Would it actually free up documents? Would anything happen if, in fact, the bill being pushed by Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie of Kentucky actually got their way? According to Ro Khanna, he's the hero of the story. Ro Khanna, the California congressman, here he was yesterday saying, we have the votes.
Well, look, we're going to get the 218th signature today. That means by early December, we're going to get a full vote on the Epstein files. And today there were bombshell emails that came out showing that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell had emails about Donald Trump's knowledge of what was going on. So we need a full release of the files. Finally, that's going to happen.
Okay, so this is cynical crap. The reality, when he says that we now know that he had knowledge of what was going on. Okay, of course he literally kicked him out of his club. He said that himself. So here I refer to Michael Tracy, who again, Michael Tracy and I have significant disagreements on a wide variety of policies. But Michael Tracy has been in the guts of this story for literally years. He is not a latecomer to the story. And one of the points that he makes is that this bill doesn't actually do anything. He says, for example, that their bill will fail to satisfy the legions of internet commenters clamoring for further investigation of Epstein's purported intelligence ties. The bill permits certain records to be kept secret in the interest of national defense or foreign policy if Pam Bondi determines that is what must be done. This means any records which bear on the involvement of intelligence agencies could be perpetually hidden per even the criteria set forth by Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie. It's silly. This bill would not give people the disclosure they want. In fact, it would provide additional justification for the government to continue thwarting disclosure. He says, to learn how to actually achieve the disclosure people say they want, you have to actually dig into the details. You have to understand a huge portion of relevant materials are being concealed by order of federal judges in New York and Florida on the grounds of preserving the privacy rights of purported victims, as well as the privacy rights of people whom these victims, mainly Giuffre, have accused of sexual misconduct almost certainly falsely. In other words, should certain of these materials be made public, it would wrongfully impugn certain individuals as perpetrators of sex crimes against minors. Now, Michael Tracy says, I would argue the extreme public interest in this matter, as well as the attendant political implications, override whatever privacy interests the wrongfully accused individuals might have to keep the records hidden in perpetuity, but it's still an ethically fraught calculation. As to records in the possession of the executive branch rather than the judiciary, similar issues apply. Grand jury materials by dint of statute can't be released willy-nilly. I wish this weren't the case, but it is. So what is the ultimate purpose of the Khanna-Massie legislation, says Michael Tracy, if it won't compel the release of records that could be intertwined with information relating to the purported victims? And it will continue to allow the government to conceal records which could illuminate any ties Epstein might have had to intelligence agencies. Unfortunately, it looks like the purpose of the legislation is mostly to give Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie a salient political issue to portray themselves as bold crusaders. I say this is unfortunate because Khanna and Massie are rare members of Congress I have any respect for whatsoever. Here's where we part ways. I have very little respect for either of those Congress people. But the reality is that this is an attention grab. It is yet another overpromise and underdeliver. Right? That is what this discharge petition is. Now, again, the Trump administration is in fact engaging in what we used to call the Streisand effect. And there's a very famous story where Barbara Streisand, a photographer, took a picture of the California coastline. It included Barbara Streisand's house. She didn't want that picture in the public, so she tried to get it taken down. And the fact that she tried to get it taken down put more attention on it. I think there's some Streisand effect going on in the Trump administration trying to, for example, kill the discharge petition. So yesterday, it was reported that the Trump administration had called Representative Lauren Boebert to go to the White House Situation Room and talk with Pam Bondi, among others, about her attempt to pass the discharge petition. According to the New York Times, Boebert went to the White House Situation Room with Attorney General Bondi and the FBI Director Kash Patel to discuss her demand to release the files. Caroline Leavitt confirmed the meeting took place. Here she was explaining.
Doesn't it show transparency that members of the Trump administration are willing to brief members of Congress whenever they please? Doesn't that show our level of transparency? Doesn't that show the level of transparency when we are willing to sit down with members of Congress and address their concerns? That is, that's a defining factor of transparency.
Now, again, there's a bit of a Streisand effect going on here. Now that it's passing in the House, there'll be a big fight in the Senate. Presumably it'll get killed in the Senate. And then people will say that Trump is trying to kill it because he doesn't want the documents released. It seems to me that as a piece of political strategy, President Trump should probably just say, fine, release everything. I don't care. And whatever the courts say we can't release, we won't. And whatever the FBI says we can't release, we won't. That basically holding by the law here for, legal purposes is not exactly a political move of genius. Yeah, I think that's where this is probably going to go in the end anyway. Listen, I'm for as many documents being out in public as humanly possible. Really. I think that we ought to see everything. I think this is true about pretty much all of these supposedly politically secret areas. With that said, I think that I understand the president's frustration with this. I do. Because he's saying, I'm busy being president, and you're bringing me this Epstein crap in order to distract from the things I'm trying to do. And the people who are trying to do it are, in fact, the people who are attempting to destroy his presidency. And that includes people inside the House. Okay, that includes people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has spent the last 2 months going out and campaigning against President Trump every way she can. So after President Trump, for example, had this much ballyhooed interaction with Laura Ingraham over high-skilled foreign workers, which we talked about at length yesterday on the show, Marjorie Taylor Greene then put out a tweet that was absolutely directed at Trump. Quote, "I'm solidly against you being replaced by foreign labor, like with H-1Bs. I am solidly against allowing foreign students into our colleges and universities. I'm against foreign aid, foreign wars, sending a single dollar to foreign countries. I'm against bringing any foreign leader that is a terrorist or overseas killing innocent people into our country and into the Oval Office. I'm elected to represent my district and the American people." So Marjorie Taylor Greene has 2028 aspirations. She is now trying to claim she is more America first than Donald Trump. At some point, President Trump probably should make it publicly clear that she is a clown backbencher Republican who is out there on The View only in order to tear him down. She is a ridiculous figure. She has flipped many of her political opinions. She will say many things to many different crowds. And there, I think, is a reason why she is signing on to this discharge petition. I do not think it is because of her deep and abiding interest in the Epstein case. Thomas Massie, very similar, because it's not just that Massie is attacking the Trump administration over the Epstein stuff. Yesterday, he was attacking the FBI over supposed unwillingness to go after January 6th information. Massie put out a letter on Twitter suggesting that the FBI was covering up the J6 pipe bomb investigation. Dan Bongino then took to X to respond, quote, "Congressman Massie, when Director Patel and I entered on duty in our leadership positions in the FBI, we had our hands full, but we were happy to be part of the president's team, and we still are. Despite the multitude of challenges we faced, one of our first initiatives was to aggressively pursue a new strategy to investigate the January 6th pipe bomb terror attack. We brought in new personnel to take a look at the case. We flew in police officers and detectives working as task force officers to review FBI work. We conducted multiple internal reviews, held countless in-person and SVTC meetings with investigative team members. We dramatically increased investigative resources. We increased the public award for information in the case to utilize crowdsourcing leads. When I spoke with you yesterday, a little after 8 a.m. Eastern, I offered you an in-person brief on our work. We spoke for 10 minutes. I called you back a bit after 7:30 p.m. Eastern to make that offer. You didn't answer and have yet to call me back. Despite this, you continue to imply the director and I are targeting investigators in the case. This is disgusting, even by the low standards many have for politicians. You know my number. You're free to call me anytime, but it's easier to tweet and throw BS bombs. Yes, our leadership team will be meeting with FBI team members today. We will avail them of all whistleblower resources they need to disclose any evidence of malfeasance in the prior administration. But a week of near 24-hour work on recent open leads in the case has yet to produce a breakthrough, and some of the media reported regarding prior persons of interest is grossly inaccurate and serves only to mislead the public. So what is Bongino saying? He's saying, listen, I called Thomas Massie to try and clear this up. I offered him a private briefing, and he ghosted me and then went online to yell about it. Because again, there are people who just want to smear the Trump administration. And yes, many of them are really not looking what the Trump administration is doing right now. They don't like what the Trump administration is doing. What they're trying to do is undermine the Trump administration so as to create a new direction away from Trump for MAGA. That is, in fact, the goal. Again, when I see MTG and Thomas Massie joining with people like Jasmine Crockett, you have to wonder whose side they're on. Here, for example, is Jasmine Crockett yesterday attacking President Trump over the Epstein stuff.
Listen, they will do and say anything to cover themselves. You know, I will admit that Donald Trump has been investigated more than the normal, but he just happens to be more corrupt and more criminal than any other president than we've had. I will point out he is the only president who has been convicted of 34 felony convictions that we've ever had in the Oval Office. So while we don't know exactly what crimes he may or may not have committed, just think of it this way. If you know that you didn't do anything, then why is it that you would be twisting members of your own party's arms, trying to get them not to release it? This would be exonerating. If you know that you are free and clear, then why not say, you know what, release the files?
Now, again, Thomas Massie and Jasmine Crockett are saying the same thing. So you have to start wondering, like, whose side people are on at this point. Now, there's some collateral damage in some of the Epstein file release. So according to some of the Epstein emails, Jeffrey Epstein, this is the New York Post reporting, ended his friendship with Bill Clinton because he believed the former president was a liar, according to new emails the disgraced financier's estate handed over to Congress on Wednesday. The emails also show a chummy relationship between Epstein and Larry Summers, the former Treasury Secretary and Harvard president. That is awkward, to say the least. But bottom line here, is there anything new about Trump that has emerged? No. Is there likely to be anything new about Trump that emerges? No. Is the bill that is now going to pass the House, is that bill going to end with the release of revelatory new documents? No. Is there any evidence that the revelatory new documents even exist? No. So what I ask is, what is happening here? And that's where you have to wonder if President Trump isn't in fact right, and that the outsized focus on Epstein is really a distraction created by political opponents in order to harm his presidency. All right, it's time for some fast facts. So, President Trump has now signed a spending bill ending the longest U.S. shutdown in American history, a shutdown that happened for literally no reason other than Democrats wanted some sort of campaign issue going into some special elections. According to the Wall Street Journal, the GOP-led House passed a spending package reopening the government. President Trump signed it into law late on Wednesday, drawing to a close a record-long 43-day shutdown driven by Democrats' demands to extend expiring healthcare subsidies. The House approved the measure 222 to 209, largely along party lines, a couple of days after the bill cleared the Senate. So the package will extend funding for the federal government through January 30th. It also includes full-year funding for the Ag Department, military construction, and the legislative branch. Presumably that includes SNAP, because the Agriculture Department oversees SNAP. The bill also includes language guaranteeing the reversal of federal layoffs that the Trump administration had initiated during the shutdown, as well as a moratorium on future cuts. The House passed it quite quickly. Democrats, of course, are very upset about this shutdown having ended. Here was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, very angry at Chuck Schumer for allowing the shutdown to end. Democrats love people. They love people so much they want them to be deprived of their SNAP benefits so that, and then just fill in the blank, because nobody knows what they were actually attempting to achieve. They were never going to achieve that which they sought.
I think it's important that we understand that this is not just about Senator Schumer, but that this is about the Democratic Party. Senator Schumer, there's no one vote that ended this shutdown. We are talking about a coordinated effort of 8 senators with the knowledge of Leader Schumer voting to break with the entire Democratic Party in exchange for nothing.
Of course, she's attempting to promote herself as a possible presidential candidate. Attacking Schumer is a great way to do that. She might want to run against Schumer in a Senate primary in New York. Attacking Schumer is a smart way to do that as well. One of the tropes of politics that has become ever more common is that if you actually wish to be president of the United States, you must first attack your own party and then go on to attack the other party. This seems to be the strategy on both sides of the aisle these days. Hakeem Jeffries, he agreed that he's disgusted by the Republican spending bill. Now, again, it is just a continuing resolution, guys. This was just continuing to fund the government at the levels already funded. This is nothing new. He can be disgusted by the one big beautiful bill. That's fine. It's his prerogative. But the idea that anything new and magical happened yesterday is silly.
House Democrats are strongly opposed to this partisan Republican spending bill that continues to gut the health care of the American people. We've said from the very beginning that we want to find a bipartisan path forward, that of course we want to reopen the government, but that we need to decisively address the Republican health care crisis, and that begins with extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits.
Okay, now again, maybe they'll have that fight, and maybe they will, have some impact politically, but they're not going to win that fight. The ACA tax credits are a massive, massive government spending boondoggle. That's what they are. That's why Democrats put them in place. The entire goal of the ACA eventually was for it to fail and then lead to nationalized healthcare. That was the entire goal, was to get people so dependent on the government dime that eventually people threw up their hands and said the government should just nationalize the entire system. That was Obama's original goal. That has really not changed in any significant way. Meanwhile, GOP Representative Tom Emmer points out that it's kind of gross that Democrats are lamenting the end of the shutdown. And they talk about how the shutdown was worth it. In what way? Nothing was achieved.
Well, they know it wasn't worth it. Frankly, the answers are disgusting. The behavior is even more disgusting. Literally, we're going to be voting on a CR that came over from the Senate. Martha, it's the exact same CR that House Republicans sent to the Senate back on September 19th with only one change.
Well, I mean, he is right about all of that. Now, does any of this solve the looming economic problems for the Trump administration? The answer is no. The stock market continues to just churn. People want to invest. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is currently above 48,000. The S&P 500 is currently at approximately 6,800. I mean, these are historically high numbers. These are very, very good numbers. Most of it is accruing to the top end of the spectrum. And this leads some people to be a little bit concerned about the possibility that this is an AI boom and that it's going to turn into an AI bust. According to the Wall Street Journal, perfect isn't good enough. Any sign of weakness is a disaster. Justified or not, that's the current mood in the markets about the AI boom. Recent history suggests the gloom won't last, but the shakeup serves as a strong reminder that the early years of AI pose a challenge for investors accustomed to measuring returns on a 12-month time horizon. Generative AI services require massive data centers and state-of-the-art chips and server racks that don't come together quickly. The companies at the heart of AI are now talking about years of major investments still ahead, which means that probably the stock market will continue to rise because they're going to continue to churn more money into AI. And if the returns don't pay off right away, well, they'll just churn more money into AI. One of the things that's happening here is that many of these big companies are investing in each other. So Oracle will toss a bunch of money at OpenAI, which will toss a bunch of money at Meta. And you'll see the money kind of swirl around the system because, again, everybody is trying to invest at the top end of the market because they think that the real growth in productivity and tech development is going to be at the AI end. According to the Wall Street Journal, the latest episode of fragility started last week when shares of some of the sector's leading lights lost ground. After a broad-based recovery Monday on news of a possible end of the government shutdown, AI-exposed stocks fell again on Tuesday. NVIDIA lost 7% last week and slipped another 3% on Tuesday, leaving it well shy of its $5 trillion market cap milestone last month. Meta has shed nearly 17% since its solid third quarter report 2 weeks ago. Palantir is down about 8% since its respectable earnings last Monday. Now, again, that's because right now the price of the stock is not connected to the earnings. You can have a good earnings quarter, but that doesn't actually change what people think about the upward trajectory of the company. If Tesla has a really, really good quarter in terms of sales, their PE ratio is totally disconnected, right? The price of the stock on Tesla is like 300 plus times the earnings. So even if the earnings go up a little bit, that's not going to change that. When people invest in Tesla, they're not investing in the self-driving car business. They're investing in the AI business. That is what's happening. OpenAI says it's planning to spend $1.4 trillion in the next 8 years. But currently, it's only pulling in around $20 billion of annual revenue today. And it's unclear how exactly they're going to reach the hundreds of billions of dollars it needs within the next few years to keep that spending growth going. OpenAI projects losses that will swell to $74 billion in 2028. So again, people are freaking out a little bit, but they also are not feeling as though they have a tremendous choice but to invest in the top of the market if they wish to invest at all. So there's a lot of uneasiness. And some of that uneasiness is connected to jobs because, of course, AI will cause jobs dislocations. There's no question that will happen. AI is going to replace a bunch of predominantly white-collar jobs. And there will be transitional moments in the economy. Jobs will come back in other areas. But that's what happens when you have a major tech change, obviously. It makes it harder to tell what's going on when you don't have data. According to the Wall Street Journal, 2 major government reports on inflation and the labor market for October are likely never to be released, according to the White House press secretary. Caroline Leavitt told reporters on Wednesday regarding the Federal Reserve, all of that economic data will be permanently impaired, leaving our policymakers at the Fed flying blind at a critical period. She blamed the government shutdown. The BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, hasn't yet said when it is likely to start catching up on the backlog of important economic reports or which ones might be compromised by a shutdown. So that data, I guess, is just in the wind, and we really don't even know what's going on. Meanwhile, President Trump's approval ratings on the economy have begun to slide. According to the most recent poll from YouGov and The Economist, Trump has a 33% unfavorable rating. That Joe Biden, at kind of the last days of his term, was down to 31%. So, again, 40% of Americans now approve of Trump's job performance, according to the CNN aggregate. 59% disapprove. And when it comes to the economy, that is where things are really dicey for President Trump. Only 39% of Americans approve of Trump's handling of the economy. 38% approve of his handling of trade. 34% approve of his handling of immigration. So again, his handling of immigration has been fine. It's just that when you get dragged down on the economy, it drags everything else down too. Okay, which means that now the administration is swiveling to talk affordability. That's not a surprise. After Zohran Mamdani's win in New York, affordability is the word of the day. And as we discussed at length yesterday, and yes, the day before, the way that you actually increase affordability, the way to make products cheaper is to make them more plentiful. If you go to a store and there's one steak and there are 100 customers, that steak will be very expensive. If there are 200 steaks and 100 customers, the steak will be very cheap. Increase the supply, retain the same demand, the price goes down. It's a very simple formula. If you wish for affordability, you must increase supply. And if you wish for cheaper products, that means also increasing the supply of the inputs into making the product. So if you're making a car and it costs a lot of money to make the engine, the overall car will be more expensive. If you lower the cost of the inputs, meaning the cost to make the engine, then the car will be less expensive. All this is very, very basic stuff. But for some reason, politicians have a very difficult time with understanding this because it mostly means get the hell out of the way. And politicians are constantly called on to take their hands and shove them in the economic pie and start moving them around all weird. And what that does is it creates uncertainty, and it doesn't actually end with broader-based economic growth. So it seems that the Trump administration is they're trying to retail policies that are designed to appeal to specific economic groups. So President Trump the other day, he kind of threw up against the wall the idea that there'd be a tariff rebate because he understands that actually the tariffs are not great for everybody. That tariffs actually in certain industries have increased the prices, that it's made it harder to do business, and that the tariffs haven't even felt their full impact yet in the economy because of all of the vacillation around what they are, what the rates are, who's going to pay it, will the Supreme Court strike them down? Yesterday, the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, he said not everybody will get that tariff rebate that President Trump had suggested, a $2,000 tariff rebate, which again, if everybody got a $2,000 tariff rebate, that's inflationary. That's just a stimulus package. So if you want to lower prices, that's actually the wrong way to do it.
Well, there are a lot of options here. The president's talking about a $2,000 rebate, and that would be for families making less than, say, $100,000.
Have you decided on that yet?
We haven't.
Okay, so, again, is that going to solve the problem? The answer is no. Meanwhile, will the Federal Reserve lower the interest rates? So there's a lot of talk about we need more affordability. Affordability will come in the form of the Federal Reserve lowering the interest rates. Well, the problem is that will make more affordable mortgages, but it will also increase the price of everything because that's just injecting more money into the economy. That's all that is doing. Over on Kalshi is a sponsor of the program. If you go back to late October, there's about an 85% shot on Kalshi that the Fed would cut by 25 basis points, 0.25%, the overnight rates, the overnight Fed rates. Now, that is all the way down to almost dead even. We are now down to approximately 55%, 56% of people saying that they'll cut, and 40% of people saying not. So things are evening out very, very quickly over there. Because again, there's a feeling like the inflationary economy is continuing and the Federal Reserve does not want to be an additional factor in that. Meanwhile, there's talk now about, again, these sort of sporadic attempts to just throw policy against the wall and see what sticks. I do not think that they are going to be beneficial to the economy broad scale. The Trump administration is now, they had promoted the idea of 50-year mortgages. We talked about this yesterday. We talked about the fact that 50-year mortgages have never been taken up by the private market because they're kind of insane. Because that is a bet that someone will never default for 50 years. And for consumers, if I have the choice between taking a low interest mortgage for 15 years or a slightly lower interest mortgage for 50 years, I'm going to take the 15-year mortgage because otherwise I'm paying interest until I die. So 50-year mortgages, not the solution. Other solutions that are not the solution, portability of mortgages. They're talking about mortgage portability. On Wednesday, the Federal Housing Finance Agency Director Bill Pulte said the administration is actively evaluating so-called portable mortgages. So I asked our sponsors over at Comet, a project of perplexity, what is a portable mortgage? Why are they uncommon in the free market? And Comet explains a portable mortgage is a type of loan that allows borrowers to transfer their existing mortgage and its terms, like the interest rate, to a new property when they move, instead of closing out their mortgage and applying for a new one. So normally, let's say that you wanted to sell your house and buy a new house. Let's say you have a $500,000 mortgage still remaining on your $1 million house. And so you sell your house for $1 million. You pay off the $500,000 mortgage. You take your $500,000 in profit. And then you go and apply for a new mortgage for a $1.3 million house. You pay whatever you have to pay down. You take a new mortgage at the current rate. That's normally how it works in the United States and pretty much everywhere else. A portable mortgage would be that instead of you doing that, you would simply go to the bank and say, I want the new house. Take that same $500,000 loan. Instead of me paying it off to you right now, I want you to take that loan and just apply it to the new mortgage. Or just move it right on over. Now, why exactly has that not happened? Why don't banks typically do this? There are a bunch of reasons banks don't typically do this. One, the U.S. market generally relies on long-term fixed-rate mortgages that lack prepayment penalties. So there's very little pressure on borrowers to keep their current mortgage because refinancing historically has been pretty easy and attractive, particularly when the rates drop. So if the rates drop, you don't want to port your mortgage over. You got a 5% interest rate on your old mortgage, and now you can get a 3% interest rate. You want to pay off the 5% and get a new 3%. Okay, but the real reason is because if you are a lender, and let's say that I want to buy a more expensive house now, right? Let's say I sell my $1 million house, and instead of me paying you the $500,000, I take the $500,000 on top, and I take that old $500,000 loan at 2%, and I move it over to a $2 million house. How am I going to pay for that? So I'll take some of the money I just made on my old house, sure, but I also am going to have to take a second mortgage. I'm going to have to take supplemental mortgages in order to increase the amount that I can pay for a house. And now my original lender is on the hook. Now my original lender is signed up for a thing they didn't sign up for. Maybe they don't think that I'm going to be able to pay off a mortgage on a $2 million house. Maybe they wouldn't have signed off on a 2% mortgage on a $2 million house for me. That's not what they signed up on a $500,000 mortgage on a $1 million house for me. When you change the terms surrounding the loan, you change the nature of the loan, which is why banks haven't done this in the free market. As pointed out by Comet, if the borrower's new home is more expensive, they must find additional financing for the difference, which adds to complexity and potential cost. Also, transferring a mortgage from one property to another is a legal and logistical problem because when you take a mortgage, what is the security for your mortgage? Right? I take a mortgage on my house. If I default, then the lender takes the home. If I port the mortgage over, is it secured against the new house or against the borrower? Legally speaking, how do you even do this? So there are a bunch of problems with this. In essence, what you will end up with is the same kind of problem of inflation in the prices of the housing market. Just like every other government intervention, it will make things slightly more affordable in the very, very near term, and then it will make things much more expensive. This, by the way, is also true about proposals that I have heard for banning corporations from buying single-family homes. Okay, so you ban corporations from buying single-family homes. You're right. That removes a large competitor in the single-family home market. And right now, in the very short term, there will be more inventory available to people who are not that corporation. Clearly, I mean, you're getting rid of a class of possible consumer in the corporation. Here's the question. Who is going to build more houses? Who's going to build more houses? If Blackstone stops buying houses in Texas, yes, you'll be able to get that same house for cheaper. But also, it is because Blackstone is buying houses in Texas that people are selling their houses to Blackstone and then purchasing new homes. And also, it is the reason why developers are developing new developments because the price is up. Because Blackstone also is buying not out of the evil of their heart, but because they believe they will make a profit. They believe that the demand will be maintained. So if you take a chunk out of the market, what you will end up doing is temporarily lowering the price by removing a possible consumer because less competition in the market, less demand. But you will also end up cratering the supply because with less demand, people generate less supply. So that's a reality too. Every government intervention has costs and has benefits, and pretending they don't is a bad way of doing economics and policy. Speaking of which, socialists have now taken Seattle. That's not a shock. Seattle's been moving in this direction for a very long time. According to Yahoo News, a progressive activist appears to be on the cusp of winning her bid for mayor of Seattle in a narrow victory that has echoes of the race to lead New York City. Katie Wilson leads Mayor Bruce Harrell by just over 1,300 votes. The incumbent led by more than 10,000 votes the day after the election, but then the mail-in ballots started, and they're still counting over there. Harrell has not conceded, but it's unlikely he'll make up the difference. Wilson is a self-described socialist focused on affordability. She wants a capital gains tax to raise revenue, meaning that more businesses will flee Seattle. Seattle happens to be a market that is heavily dependent on a few very large corporations. So, once again, the socialists will win, and then they will drive these cities to the brink, presumably. Zohar Mamdani, for his part, says that he needs to call President Trump, and he needs to get him on the hook for paying some of New York's bills. Here was Zohar Mamdani yesterday.
I will be reaching out to the White House and as we prepare to actually take office, because this is a relationship that will be critical to the success of the city.
So it wasn't just a hypothetical scenario on our debate stage.
No.
You're actually going to call him. What will you say?
Well, I'll say that I'm here to work for the benefit of everyone that calls the city home, and that wherever there is a possibility for working together towards that end, I'm ready. And if it's to the expense of those New Yorkers, I will fight it.
So he's gonna fight President Trump, but he'll call President Trump. He'll try to make friends with President Trump. Good luck to you, sir. Good luck to you. Just like every other socialist, he's perfectly happy to spend other people's money and other people's political capital, in the case of Governor Kathy Hochul, who is now stuck between the socialist rock and the electoral hard place. We'll see how it works out for her. And meanwhile, Michelle Obama, she has a brand new book, and it is a coffee table tome called The Look. It is a glossy photo book full of fashion. And according to the New York Times, it is the story of the expectations that were heaped upon the first black first lady. It is the third installation of a trilogy of books by Mrs. Obama that focus on self-realization, including her memoir, her advice book on overcoming adversity, and this time, a meditation on the power of clothes. So exciting. Here was Michelle Obama talking about her look book. Here we go.
And we have to start educating people about all kinds of beauty.
Yes.
And our beauty is so powerful and so unique that it is worthy of the conversation, and it's worthy of demanding the respect that we're owed for who we are and what we offer to the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, apparently, she's a victim, as always, Michelle Obama. And her book is really about the sufferings of a lady who was the first lady, according to the New York Times, ever to have a stylist or valet on the East Wing payroll. One employed to help define the visual strategy of the first lady for every occasion, from public hula hooping to major moments of pageantry. So before the Obamas were there, then there were occasional designers who would come in for specific events, but she had like a full-time stylist. And then that became the norm. Melania and Joe Biden each employed a full-time stylist as well. But according to the New York Times, her new book lays bare in an unprecedented way how a wardrobe was transformed into a vehicle of soft political power. Wow, soft political power. How impressive. Truly amazing. Well, as always, Michelle Obama can do no wrong. She's the Oprah Winfrey of our time, who constantly talks about how terrible her life is while being one of the most privileged people ever to walk planet Earth. Alrighty, coming up, we'll jump into controversy emerging around some moves by the Catholic Church. First, remember, in order to watch, you have to be a member. If you're not a member, become a member, use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click the link in the description and join us.